Hello, Dylan.
Hi.
So tonight for this debate, we will only be talking to one of the candidates because unfortunately Harris couldn't make it. However, the debate is still going on. So, yeah. Sorry, the audio has been a bit laggy here. So, anyways, our first question of the night will be...
Do I not get to do an opening statement, or?
Yes. First, please give your opening statement.
Okay. So hi, I'm Dylan. I'm fourth year maths student. I'm running to be next activities officer. So over the past 2 years, I've been an exec on 2 societies. I was a treasurer on Maths, and I'm currently the co-president for RAG. So I know exactly what I feel. Personally, I feel I know exactly what societies need coming out of this pandemic, as we've obviously recently had some good news that we're hopefully going to be able to do in-person activities in the coming year. So obviously this year we've all been online. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very difficult transition for most societies coming forward. And I believe my manifesto, my experience is going to help these societies in the start of the new year.
So our first question is, as part of your manifesto, you said you were going to revamp the Freshers' Fair. How exactly do you plan to revamp the Freshers' Fair?
So mainly I'd want to start with a rebrand, because obviously year on year, you get people asking, oh, is the Freshers' Fair just for freshers? And I think honestly now more than ever, when we've seen a minor uptake in freshers from the societies here, who are going to be second years going forward, it's going to be very important to make them aware that they are allowed to go to that Freshers' Fair, and it is for them as well. So I think maybe rebranding it something like a societies fair or something else. Obviously, marketing comes later down the line, but I do think it needs a rebrand for next year, especially.
Another line in your manifesto said that you plan to provide more space on campus for society use and licenses for Zoom alternatives. How do you plan to provide this extra space on campus? Where would it be? And through what avenues would you go to obtain licenses for alternatives to Zoom?
So when it comes to getting more space on campus, I think part of Hannah's work at the beginning of the year did involve talking to the uni to get more rooms. So I'd obviously just want to make sure that they don't back down on that now that they've had a year to possibly forget about it. So obviously, I think as Hannah's proved, it is definitely possible to squeeze out more room from the uni, especially for society use. In terms of getting a license for Zoom alternatives, it's obviously this year we've all had to adapt to Zoom and stuff, and I believe early on in the pandemic there was a lot of like novelty to it, and it really helped in terms of getting people to turn up to events and try out some new things. But at this point, it's become pretty stale. We do it for lectures, for uni, and all our social gatherings every week now. So yeah. So the reason I want to get Zoom alternatives is something like Hopin, which is primarily designed for hosting large events, because as I've said, we've been using Zoom. I've personally experienced how difficult it can be to handle a Zoom call of over 60 people at an event. So do you think getting a license, that would be very efficient? In terms of how to get it, obviously could just fitting it into the budget, because I think as I mentioned, the benefit of having an alternative is very apparent. So I think it would be very easy to work into a budget, and most of them have like monthly payment options, so we can only pay for it when we do need it. For instance, if Freshers' Fair does end up having to be online again this year, maybe just paying it for that 1 month to help with the Freshers' Fair and help the uptake in new members.
As part of your post-lockdown support section of your manifesto, you promised to provide extra resources and trainings for committees to help with the organization of in-person events when they return. What exact extra resources and training will you provide? Those phrases are rather vague.
Yes, I'm fully aware of that. So in terms of extra training, so when it comes down to it, this year there have been no in-person events. Any any incoming committee this year, the handover is going to be very lackluster when it comes on how to plan in-person events. Fortunately, as I've mentioned, last year I did have a lot of experience when it came to planning events, so I'm part of the training for that would be to give them more in-depth insight and stuff like booking venues, dealing with large crowds, because obviously stuff like that will be missing from most handovers this year. And in terms of extra resources, that basically it was a bit vague, I agree, but it basically just comes down to providing that training, and also, as I mentioned previously in my manifesto, about providing hygiene equipment, because we're not immediately, I know Boris is very optimistic, but I do think we're still going to have some form of social distancing or some sort of increased hygiene expected at events. So making sure that societies have access to that for at least a reduced cost, or hopefully free, provided by the SE or uni, is going to be very important.
Okay. You also mentioned, as part of your efforts to help society connections, that you will increase the awareness and benefit of Go Volunteer and Give Us a Go opportunities by giving incentives for working with them. What incentives will you offer for Go Volunteer or Give Us a Go? What types of incentives will they be? And will they be all similar things, or will they be a variety of things? What exactly were you thinking of here?
So in terms of Give It a Go, one of the incentives I was thinking of this is maybe providing a reduced cost or maybe free admission to some for committee members who work with Give It a Go to some of their other events, because Give It a Go generally in a normal year do put on quite a lot of good events. So just giving like the committee members that incentive to organize with them, not only because obviously you've got the inherent advantage of working with Give It a Go of having a larger outreach and being able to put on slightly larger events. But if you tell them, it's like, oh, you can go to a Fat Hippo or Lola Jeans is one they do quite a bit. You can go for a free meal at Lola Jeans afterwards. Would really, I think, help increase uptake in that. In terms of Go Volunteer, obviously, each department gets a budget for the year. I would maybe ask them if it's worthwhile to maybe put a bit aside to give some small financial incentives to societies that work with Go Volunteer. Because obviously, we've spent an entire year of volunteering being basically impossible on most fronts, or at least very difficult. So I do think it's in their interest as well to try and get more people involved in volunteering, especially on campus and related.
Okay. You also say something about planning to facilitate inter-society mixers in order to encourage more collaborative events and socials. How do you plan to facilitate those mixers? And do you think you have or will have a good enough relationship with the heads of societies to be able to put something like that together effectively?
Well, I'd hope I'd have a decent relation with all the heads of societies, considering that's part of the job. So one idea I was thinking of this is, if when it comes to training at the beginning of the year, maybe just setting aside like an extra hour or half an hour at the start or end, just to give everybody a chance to mingle and talk to each other, because especially this year, I feel like I'm just repeating some points, but it's been a very hard year for them. So just giving them that chance to really talk and discuss ideas, because if maybe somebody's planning an event that's similar to another society, or maybe it's much easier to ask in that informal setting what went wrong, what went well, how would you improve if you did it again, sort of thing. So yeah, that's basically how I'd want to facilitate those mixes.
Okay. You mentioned in your materials that you have in the past previously been the treasurer of Math Soc and the co-president of RAG. What have you learned from those roles when it comes to working with the SU and working with other societies and just running a society as part of the system in general? And how do you plan to apply those lessons you've learned in this role?
So I'd say, so last year I was treasurer of Math Soc. I'd say that gave me a pretty good insight into how I'm managing a budget for a society, which is obviously another part of the activity officer role, is managing that large budget. So obviously, I would just be upscaling that. Sorry, I'm getting a bit lost. It was a bit of a long question. So it's just basically talking about each of my roles and how I'd apply the experiences from them. Okay. So yeah, another thing about treasurer last year was I had to quickly adapt to COVID, which was very fun. We had to do lots of unfortunate cancellations in there and start planning some online socials to make sure that we didn't end the year with nothing. because obviously a part of our, I say obviously, you probably don't know, but part of our socials last year were to raise money for the People's Kitchen, so we really didn't want to miss out on raising money for charity, even though we're moving strictly online. In terms of this year, as co-president of RAG, it's been full COVID. We were hopeful. We have done lots. We did do lots of planning at the beginning of the year to be hopeful that we were out of COVID by January for our usual RAG week, which requires lots and lots of prep. But unfortunately, that went down the gutter by December. So we very quickly there had to adapt to completely changing to an online RAG week, which we did end up going ahead with and was quite successful, raising over £1,000 for charity that week. Also to note, I do have some first-time experience of organising a normal RAG week as well, which involves lots of liaising with the SU, well not liaising, but working around the SU in venue, putting up tents and stalls. I feel like I know firsthand how the SU works in those aspects in person. Is there a tech issue?
That was excellent. Now we have a question from the YouTube chat from an audience member. Here goes. You want to get licenses for Zoom alternatives such as Happen. Why do you want digital solutions such as this when things look set to get back to being in person for the next academic year?
So, as people will probably know, we only got that news on Monday, and I had to write my manifesto around 2 to 3 weeks ago. So I was not able to plan that far ahead. Unfortunately, I'm not psychic. So I'd rather be cautiously pessimistic than overly optimistic. So I'd say that's why I was mentioning online alternatives such as Hopin.
Thanks. So a couple of more general questions just about this role in general,
Yep.
Being an activities officer. How do you plan to make societies more financially accessible and inclusive of all students, considering that these are two very hot button topics that often come up in terms of society's policy via NUSU?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it's very important that we want to make as many societies as accessible as possible to as many people. So in terms of financial accessibility, I'd probably, well, I mean, we've already got the partition bursary for financially struggling students. I believe, don't know the exact same now, but I remember in my first year when it was advertised to me, it was about 300 quid. So just making sure that there's enough promotion of that, especially amongst within societies, would be very beneficial in making it more financially accessible. In terms of inclusivity, obviously I'm a white cis male. I'm unfortunately not, I'm a bit privileged not knowing struggles of inclusivity, but I'd be very much willing to work with the welfare officer, whoever that ends up being. I believe all the candidates are at least some people of color. So they'd be much more, be able to provide much more insight into any inclusivity issues that I would be maybe less knowledgeable on.
Thanks. Now, obviously, for the past year, we've been in the midst of COVID-19. So I think a rational question to ask after that is probably a question covering one of the more recent concerns that the student body would have, which is how do you plan to support societies as the COVID-19 pandemic continues?
Well, I feel my manifesto kind of answers that main point. I want to make sure that if we do end up online, that there are enough options and alternatives for people to access online stuff. If we do end up coming out as we're hopeful for, I feel like I've mentioned previously in this, I don't want to just end up repeating myself, but I've mentioned what I'd want to do to increase the society support that's definitely required in coming out of the pandemic. Yeah.
Okay, now for something a little bit more niche, just very, very specifically related to the role, what are your plans for the activity storage closet downstairs in the student union?
Okay, yeah, this is often something that does come up because it is a mess, or no better way of putting it. Obviously, unfortunately, we haven't been allowed on campus, so I have no idea what it's like at the moment. I'd hope with it being nearly a year it being unused, it's been a little bit tidier. Okay, that's a shake of the head there from Hannah, so probably not. So yeah, I'm erming a lot here. So it's important to make sure it's maintained and upkept, but unfortunately, it is one of the things that year on year people have tried to fix, but you can't fix it. It just needs upkeep. Unfortunately, I haven't had to use it that much, so I don't know what the process is like. I do know where it is. Just mentioned that, but yeah, when it comes to it, it's basically just go about encouraging societies to make sure they maintain it whenever they visit it, and maybe having some way of monitoring how it is, because I do believe it's smart card access to get in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe there might be a way to track who goes in there via that smart card access, and if after a certain amount of time, if you notice, oh, every time this person scans in there, it's a tip afterwards, maybe chasing that society up on that to make sure they either deal with it or they're not allowed to use that space anymore.
Okay, now it's time for another question from the YouTube chat. Is there any way we can have more trolleys in the SU for stacking chairs? Currently, it is almost impossible to clear up after events.
So, okay, that's definitely targeted at me. So, as stacking chairs in venue is an absolute nightmare, and I do agree. Having more trolleys available so that people can stack chairs more efficiently and effectively in a more timely manner, because I don't know if anybody's been down there, but after an event with like 200 to 300 people, it takes nearly a full hour to clean that. And honestly, just 2 to 3 more trolleys to help with that stacking would definitely help. So I'd maybe look into budget there, but obviously I feel that's more venue management's department. So I'd maybe ask them about it.
Okay, another YouTube question. Your experience in society committee seems to be from larger societies, such as Math, Social, and RAG. How confident are you in ensuring you'll meet the needs of smaller societies too?
This is a very, very valid question. Obviously, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in large societies. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not completely aware of the struggles small societies face, and I'd be willing to listen to small societies on that. I'm aware this year we've had a lot of new societies pop up. They're definitely on the smaller side at the moment. Like, I know RAG ended up working with someone from Drag Society during RAG Week, and they were thoroughly impressed how we were able to get 60, whereas most of us were disappointed. Just going to show the sense of disparity in what we consider good numbers there. But yeah, I definitely want to sort of liaise with the small societies to get a better understanding of the struggles they have and how I could support them in the coming year. So obviously, yeah.
Okay. So in your experience just in life, what sorts of problem-solving skills do you have that you can bring to the table as activities officer? I know we've already touched on this a bit when I was asking about your experiences with Math, Social, and RAG, but just like in life in general, what sorts of problem-solving skills do you have? What sorts of approaches do you take to things? And what sort of like schema do you have of the problem in this instance?
Fair question. Trying to think if I can think of any options that aren't society related at the moment, but most of the problem solving examples I can think of at the moment are related to societies. So last year when I was a general on RAG, often before events there'd be lots of issues before every event, such as finding chairs, tech issues, whatever, or you would sometimes encounter welfare issues on events. And generally my thought process in that scenario is just try and prioritize, either if it's like an event related thing, just make sure everything is as good as it can be first within my power. So knowing the limits of what I can do and then making sure I push that to the best of my ability. When it comes to like welfare issues, obviously prioritize people's safety and well-being. Like if someone's uncomfortable, make sure they're safe first before you do anything else. Do you want some more specific non-society related ones? Because I may struggle there.
Okay. How do you plan to support new societies, and how do you handle conflict surrounding new societies and existing societies, assuming that the conflict in question was something that was within your remit to deal with. Obviously, not every society-related conflict is going to have anything to do with anything that you can control. However, there are going to be conflicts where you do have an element of control. How do you plan to deal with that when supporting new societies and in general?
So first, I'd just like to say that I feel new societies do get enough support, at least in the early days, because this year we've already seen about 20 new societies to pop up in the middle of a pandemic, which I think is ridiculously impressive of them. I could not go with a new society in the middle of a pandemic. But in terms of supporting them going forward, as I said before, it would just be maybe just paying special attention to them in emails, maybe shooting them an email every now and then, like, oh, your memberships, how's your membership doing? You're doing all right with memberships? Or are you struggling to book rooms because all the bigger societies are something on you beforehand? So I think, obviously, I don't have any first-hand experience in running a new society, so I'd really just want to liaise with them and find out how I can most benefit them. And in terms of dealing with conflicts, again, I just think it's about communicating, really. If there's an issue between two societies, maybe communicating with them, their presidents, their exec, trying to understand the issue from my side of things and seeing if I can give an objective view on it, or as objective as I can be regarding the situation, depending on what it is.
Okay, excellent. Now, I'd like to ask our current activities officer, Hannah Finney, to bring forward any questions that she may have.
Yeah, I've just got a quick one. It might throw you off a bit just because it is quite recent that's come up in the news.
Okay.
But with the recent government talks of the freedom of speech being an issue in students' unions, how would you handle societies that want to book a politically contentious speaker? Because you have to go through the external speaker form, but how would you make sure that they're booking the right people and it's not going to cause an issue with the society and the university?
That's definitely a spicy one. So yeah, obviously controversial figures, big issue. Yeah. Oh. Well, obviously the first thing would be there to do a full like say if it's someone from a niche area, if you're getting in any guest speaker to make sure that they haven't said anything like, I feel like maybe Anime Suck could bring some random speaker and then someone finds out later they've said some horrible things online and that maybe an average person wouldn't be that aware of, but like people in that area may be aware of. So basically just make sure that we have thorough background checks on any guest speakers that do get brought in. Talking to the welfare and equality officer, who I imagine will be much more knowledgeable on any specifics of if they've been of whether discrimination, that sort of thing, making sure that's okay with them. Obviously, it's within the remit to make sure students feel safe on campus. So we want to check with them.
And there's just a quick question in the YouTube comments, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So this year's training was online, but when you plan your training in the future, would you move it in person again, or would you do continue it online as well?
Cheers. So obviously, that being able to do it, depending on how we do it, might not be a choice, depending on how restrictions are come September. But ideally, I would like to do it in person. Unfortunately, this year, training was completely online, but I don't think it was really enough, at least the format of online it was this year. Because as a president, I literally got a 2 to 3 minute video and that was it. No, sorry, Hannah. But that just isn't enough, especially for important roles like president, secretary, and treasurer. That just isn't enough. So if it does end up having to be online next year, I think obviously the videos are a good starting point, but you do need more compulsory sessions such as Zoom or something where you can have a dialogue more easily, and not just making them optional, because if you make them optional, barely anyone's going to turn up with them unless they have a real issue. And sometimes people don't realize they have a real issue till it comes 3 months later and they're trying to do something and then they realize they're not fully prepared for it. So yeah, I think that's what I want to do.
Cool. And no worries about how bad the training was this year. You can say it, it's fine.
You were cautiously optimistic that we were going to have in-person training at some point, but you're a bit too optimistic there.
Cool. And then this is just my last question, Liz, but I'm just been nosy. Have you got any ideas about what campaigns you might like to do next year as activities officer?
Not really at the moment. It's something I've not really put much time to thought, as obviously a lot of my manifesto does focus on supporting societies out of lockdown, which is what I believe is what's most important to me at the moment. Obviously, come July, September, whenever I could be activities officer, that would be something I'd definitely spend a lot more time thinking about and try and put something good on.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. We have one more question from YouTube, which was, many societies outsource to other Newcastle venues due to higher drinks prices. Could there be the potential to discuss drinks deals for society events with Luthers, and would you be happy to help?
That would definitely be something I'd be willing to have a discussion with, but at the moment, I feel, well, it depends what you're drinking, to be honest, because at the moment you can get a pint in Luthers for £2, and I feel that's a pretty cheap price. But obviously, when it comes to spirits and stuff, it does get a bit more expensive. I do believe we've had a discussion before. I've had a discussion with venue before, and getting those spirit prices down is generally a bit of an issue. But I think definitely securing drink deals for like lager and wine societies is good. I mean, normally they're willing to offer you bottles of Prosecco. I say Prosecco, it's not quite, it's just sparkling wine. But they are willing to offer Prosecco to most societies that end up hosting their events, and this is at least starting there. So I'd just make sure that can carry on next year, because the budget's going to be a little bit tighter next year. And I feel like it's definitely going to be within Luthers and venues' best interest to try and get as many societies in there as possible.
That's good to hear. Another YouTube question. Turns out that was not the last one. There was a thrilling sequel. Okay. Have you got any initial thoughts you'd be willing to share regarding how you'll make sure graduation ball is an amazing event after 1 or 2 years without one?
That's actually a pretty good question. So at the moment, I haven't got any ideas. But initially one thought I just have off the top of my head is maybe not have it in Gossip's Park Hotel, because that is quite a ways outside of town, and trying to secure a good venue close to the town so it's easier and cheaper for people to get to, and so they can enjoy themselves more easily afterwards. Would be one thing I'd like to focus on if/when grad ball could happen.
Okay, there's going to be one more YouTube question, however that was retracted. That being said, I do have one last spicy question of my own. If there were a group of people who wanted to start a society that was very contentious or controversial, or just something very strange and unusual that you did not like and didn't think would gain great student body approval, how would you treat them with regards to ratification?
So is this in terms? So are you talking like is the subject of the society controversial? Or is it just something that people might not like? Okay. I'm just having a bit of clarification on the question. So is it like an objectively controversial topic, or is it something that's just like a bit like not everybody likes it sort of thing?
Well, I was thinking something that's like actually controversial, like really controversial.
Okay, fair. So really, I'd probably just say no, because you don't want, like, obviously the uni and societies are supposed to be is inclusive for everyone. Obviously, I wouldn't just straight out say no. I'd maybe talk to them about it first and see why exactly do you want the society, if they're doing it for the right reasons. Like if someone just wants to make a society to cause a stir, that's not happening. It's just not. But yeah, if they've maybe got any good intent behind that, seeing how they can maybe like rework that intent into something that's a bit more acceptable, I guess. Yeah, so that's the best answer I can give to that.
Okay, thanks. Okay, turns out the other spicy YouTube question is back. Say there is a communication/message from the executive area or on another committee member This causes significant friction within the committee. How would you help support this?
So I'm assuming this would be talking about like communication issues and sort of butting heads internally in committees. So basically, I'd probably want to make sure that there's enough signposting to, if they have got any like legitimate complaints with what's going on, there's enough signposting there for where and who they need to talk to. Probably me if I end up being activities officer. And maybe, again, just trying to communicate with them there, understand the issue, bring in welfare and equality or anybody else who would be suitable for whatever the issue may be. But yeah, basically just being open to ideas and asking for appropriate help in trying to resolve whatever issue there is.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think there are any more questions. I'll double check the list on social media. Okay, we've covered all of those. Anyways, Hannah, do you have any last remarks?
I don't think so. I think that we had a good variety of questions. But yeah, I don't think that's anything else that I can say.
Okay, thank you very much. Dylan, do you have any last remarks at the end of the debate?
Yeah, so I'd just say thanks to NUTV, NSR, Courier for putting all these on. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to have a proper debate, but I hope this has given everyone a good idea of what I'm about and why you should vote for me next week when voting goes on March 1st, midday to March the 4th. If you want to learn more about me and my campaign or ask me any questions, just follow me at Dylan for Activities on Instagram and Dylan1 for Activities on Facebook is my Facebook page. So yeah, vote for me if you think I'd be good for the job. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Dylan. That marks the end of our debate.